Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the B2B journey to composable commerce. We're going to give everyone about 2 more minutes to join the live cast before we begin with the content. During this time, I'll just go through a few housekeeping notes. This session will be recorded, and everyone registered and attending will receive a copy of the recording within the next few days. We'll also have time for a Q&A at the end, so feel free to input your questions into the questions chat in the side panel throughout the session, and we'll try to get to as many as possible at the end. Okay, so I think we are at a good time to get started. Welcome again, everyone, to today's live session, where we will be hearing about how B2Bs can build digital experiences for strategic business growth and how they are faring with their composable commerce journeys. My name is Julia Rapkin. I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager for B2B at commercetools, and I am super excited about our lineup today. We're going to open up with our first guest speaker, of whom I am a huge fangirl, Joe Seisman, who is the Principal Analyst for B2B Commerce at Forrester. Joe will set the scene for us on where B2B businesses are today and why composability matters. Joe will then open it up to a fireside chat with our 2 incredible executive practitioners, Mark Pickett, the former VP of Marketing at MSC Industrial, and Jeff Amash, the CFO, who will share their real-world experiences about their journeys with Composable. I'll come back at the end to close off with a few very brief words from commercetools, and then I'll open up the Q&A. I hope that sounds good for everyone. And with that, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Joe Seisman from Forrester.
Thanks, Julia. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Joe Seisman. I'm an analyst here at Forrester Research. I cover B2B e-commerce, marketplaces, and digital experience platforms. I work with tech leaders as they plan their journey to go from where they are today to where they want to be using composable technology. And I'm going to take you through what I take my clients through. And then in about 15 minutes, I'm going to introduce you again to those 2 folks who made the hero's journey to composable. So let's get going. You're not new here. You've grown up to get where you are. And it's been years, decades, since your business was founded. And it hasn't been easy. And the business environment may have been even more hostile than it was today, but that means you're no stranger to the race. You know how to prepare, how to anticipate, and you know how to dig deep to pull yourself past the competition. Heck, you might even have watched a Rocky movie or 2 along the way to get yourself in the zone. Having digital skills is important because the new connected consumer poses a challenge for digital businesses. And digital business pros like you need to understand how your customers connect across 3 dimensions: devices, platforms, and channels, and then map your portfolio of experiences so that you're present where your customers are. Now, the model for thinking through your portfolio of experiences is something that we call the 3D connected consumer. 3 dimensions: devices, platforms, and channels now define how people are connected to the internet. And digital businesses need to serve their customers wherever they are in these complex ecosystems. So you need to take a fresh look at how your customers connect as you craft your technology and platform portfolios. And that's because customers use combinations of devices, platforms, and channels that many firms don't support. You need to understand your customers' digital ecosystems in order to map your portfolio of experiences to how your particular customers connect. And that's not a trivial endeavor. Customer journeys are not simple, and digital businesses aren't in control of how the customer goes through that journey. Your digital experience platform is the technology stack upon which you build experiences to support buyer journeys that are nonlinear and in the buyer's control. And the talent that you employ to build those journeys, your practitioners, well, they need no-code flexibility built into their tools because they don't have time to constantly rely on developers. Now, that's a high bar for technology to keep up with. And solving this challenge requires a new generation of technology. But much of the packaged e-commerce software out there today was developed before the cloud. The composable commerce software today was written cloud native for a cloud world. Your journey from one to the other will not be without its challenges, but that's just the nature of the race. So you need to really grasp your why. Your customers' needs should be your why. You need to obsess over that why, like your existence depends on it. But it's not the technology that knows what your customer wants. Your people have to do that work by working in alignment and by putting the customer at the center of everything they do. Through our research, Forrester has discovered and described what we call the customer-obsessed operating model. Customer obsession, putting the customer at the center of your leadership, strategy, and operations, enables you and your company to sense and respond to market circumstances. Now, that specific blend of leadership, strategy, and operations characteristics enables any enterprise to be customer-led, insights-driven, fast, and connected. And we've expressed this as a maturity model that has 5 stages, and here's how it pays off. Customer obsession pays off in growth. Enterprises at the highest level of maturity, the truly customer-obsessed enterprises, grew 1.6 times faster than their less mature peers. And we do this survey every year. We measure year-over-year revenue growth at enterprises around the world. And in our uncertain macro environment, the success chasm is widening between businesses that are customer-obsessed and those that are not. So that's your why. You obsess over your customers so that you can grow faster, which necessitates a more fit technology strategy. The customer-obsessed operating model is how you orient your business around your customer. And then when you combine that with the right technology strategy, what Forrester calls a future fit technology strategy, what results is you having new ways of working and new ways that those customers can engage with you. 3 core drivers, platforms, practices, and partners, give rise to 3 crucial capabilities. The ability to be adaptive, that's the ability to change when you spot an opportunity. The ability to be resilient, that's the ability to change when something exogenous like a pandemic happens. And the ability to be creative, which you can think of as your ability to be resourceful even without being full of resources. Again, this comes to life in your business as new ways of working and new ways that customers can engage with you. Now, there are technology strategies that are a fit for each stage of customer obsession. But to advance in customer obsession, you need to advance your technology strategy in lockstep. Now, Composable wasn't designed for large companies. It was designed for technologically sophisticated businesses with significant customer opportunities. And the price of the technology is what it'll cost you to mature your technology management if you haven't already. Your transition from packaged platforms with built-in for support for those pervasive digital strategies to platforms that you compose for your differentiated digital strategy must be undertaken with eyes wide open, because composable architecture was designed to solve a specific problem under specific circumstances. It wasn't designed to be an out-of-the-box solution for digital strategies that lots of companies are running, something that Forrester calls digital sameness. It was designed to allow you to quickly build and rebuild solutions so that as you work to remain differentiated or as you work to find product market fit. Now, which means you don't have to be big to be mature. You don't have to be big to capture the benefits of composing. Okay, so ask yourself these questions. Number 1, do your senior executives put aside their opinions when faced with customer insights that contradict them? Number 2, do you have C-level executive responsible for making sure that the customer is considered first in decisions about strategy and operations? Do you balance customer and business needs? Do you apply design thinking methods to decisions throughout the company? And do you analyze the relationship among customer loyalty indicators, employee engagement indicators, and business outcomes? Well, these are 5 of 20 questions that we use to understand the state of customer obsession within a business. The technology you need to enable you to be customer obsessed doesn't come in a box like a paint by numbers kit. Instead, you need to orient your entire business around your customer. And then you need to pick technologies as and when you discover the need for them. But it starts with discovering your customer's need. Your technology roadmap fulfills strategy with priorities set by business impact. So number 1, build a customer journey map highlighting the moments of engagement. Number 2, prioritize the moments and the back-end processes based on the benefit to customers and the value to you. And third, pursue a 2-path roadmap to move quickly while laying the foundations for the future. The best organizations invest aggressively in the digital touchpoints and moments that their customers need most. They build their team's confidence in the business impact by estimating the uptake and value of each digital moment. And they identify the software and data they need for each digital moment. Again, the only way to run quickly while building the foundations for your digital business is to invest twice. First, by rolling out new capabilities in months, and then again in long-term digital experience platforms that can take years to implement. Now, this will test you, like any change will test you. And that's why you need to have your why front of mind. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to talk to two people who lived in the ordinary world. And then one day they heard the call to adventure. And perhaps one of them at first refused the call, but we'll hear what that looked like. They ultimately all advance to the road of trials, and that's the stage of a hero's journey during which the hero undergoes a series of trials and tests. But the part I want you to walk away with here is the final two stages of the hero's journey: master of the two worlds and freedom to live. Because freedom to live and freedom to grow is what you're setting out to achieve. And a reminder, the technology you use is your gear. The primary change isn't the technology. The primary change is the digital strategy to engage a new generation of customer. The technology needs to enable that strategy change, but it has to be done in lockstep. But again, strategy is the driver. Okay, so now it's time to sit down with our heroes, Jeff and Mark, to hear the story of their journey to Composable. All right, now we're indoors. We're comfortably separated from the hostile environment, having traversed it to build a digital business prepared to thrive and offer much needed value. So I'm going to introduce them one at a time, and then I'm going to ask them to explain their why. So first up, Mark Pickett, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your origin story and what's your why?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone, Mark Pickett here, formerly the leader of marketing within MSC Industrials. Before that, I was with Staples and also with Sears. So I've kind of operated in both the B2B and the B2C space. Um, and I will, so in moving to the why, right? I think that most important, especially in either of those go rounds, but specifically the last two, for me, if you look at the industry that I was in, namely the industrial sector, this business model that is typically used within the industrial sector is often a laggard when it comes to technology adoption. And so, what does that mean? It means that our maintenance costs were growing to be exorbitant. It meant that those that were actually doing a lot of the changes, the modifications to the things that we needed or the updates were absolutely good at what they were doing, but in fact, they weren't tied to the business outcomes. And I think that there's a something we'll talk about in a minute that sort of aligns with the need for everyone to be wrapped around the customer in a way that we understand the outcomes associated with them. And in that model that we had before, moving to this composable commerce strategy, you didn't see that. And then lastly, I would say, and I think that Joe already mentioned it in part, that we had to meet our customers where they were, right? So in the B2B world specifically, much different than B2C, there are a lot of things that sort of are that operate around a transaction, billing, invoicing, details that are associated with a lot of the operational aspects of the business that are very complicated. And the truth is that the changes that we needed to make needed to happen, and they needed to happen in a much faster way, and also in a way that allowed those teams between IT, the business units themselves, um, and marketing specifically to be integrated in terms of how we thought about our approach to them. That meant that we had to make some changes, right, in order to support that. So again, when we wrapped the entire company around the customer, it meant that we had to really rethink what I call the ways that we work, right? And so we had to start to incorporate the outcomes associated with what we were looking for with the work that was being conducted. And that meant that we had to really start thinking about breaking down those silos. So that was our why, my why.
That's great. Jeff Amash, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what was your why?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Jeff. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Tecton. We're a hand tool company. We're a manufacturer of hand tools for use primarily in mechanical work. So things like wrenches, sockets, ratchets, pliers, screwdrivers. And we manufacture those products under our brand, Tecton. We are maybe a little bit unusual from a common or a typical commercetools customer in that we're not a massive company. And actually, um, that was something that I like what Joe said earlier, that it isn't really about size. It is about your technological desire. And we recognized pretty early on that we could differentiate ourselves, especially in the hand tool industry, by being leaders in the way that we use technology to reach our customers. For us, that actually started, we were historically a B2B company, and our technological journey really started actually when we moved into the D2C space on a legacy kind of monolith platform. After we did that, we realized, well, we could also reach these B2B customers as well online. And we built out a B2B platform for them using the same legacy software. In the last couple of years, we realized that we could do a lot more in terms of reaching our D2C customers with speed, with flexibility, performance. And so we moved to commercetools and we built out our site based on that. And, it was a pretty natural extension to realize, our B2B customers expect the same kind of experience that a D2C shopper wants. They are used to shopping in really streamlined, easy ways. And so we just within the last year realized that we could upgrade that whole side of our business as well. And that really drove us to the building our site through commercetools for our B2B customers as well. And it's been wonderful.
That's great. All right. Thanks, guys, for giving the audience an intro and also for giving them a view into what was in your head and what kept you driving on. Okay, the next stage of the hero's journey is, well, they live in the ordinary world, and then they get the call, and sometimes they refuse the call. Mark, can you kind of paint a picture for us of what life was like in the ordinary world before you made this jump in? And also, in case we're talking to anybody who has hesitancy in the audience, can you tell them if you ever actually refused the call?
I'll say this. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, right? And I think again, when you're faced with very real business pressures, um, in terms of in our case, well, in both companies that I mentioned before, or all three technically, but in terms of from a B2B standpoint, each were moving along this journey around or evolving in this electronic commerce. Uh, they were evolving, right? And in this part of the journey specifically, um, the, the best way I can describe it is to say we had to move away from an order taking model where things were very separate, right? So, there are strategies that are sort of created without really an understanding of the work required in order to produce the outcomes we were looking for. That had to change in a way that rather than having this, hey, IT, we need this new service stood up, which is actually very modular, is not very modular. It's part of an existing package that we need to bolt onto this legacy system kind of thing. Without doing it that way, um, you know, traditionally in this world, they would just simply be a recipient, right, of the order, right? So I call this order taking, right, where you just, hey, this is what we want to do, go do it, please, or help us do this. Versus really understanding why we're trying to get this done, so that they can help us solution through it. But in order to do that as well, you may still, in the traditional or the legacy space, you would still end up with the same solution because it was very non-modular, and everything was simply, as you mentioned, Joe, very packaged, right? And it was simply bolt-ons that you were adding to these existing frameworks that you've already sort of subscribed to or had implemented for up teen years. And that wasn't going to make it, right? That sort of model of operating wouldn't is not sustainable in this new world. Why? Because there's so many things that are happening, so many things that are changing so fast that you actually have to be able to make those changes. You have to make those. You have to be able to support the changes that are being required from your customer base, right? And I'll give you one quick example. In industrial specifically, and I'm sure Jeff can attest to this as well. You like when you have your small to medium sized customers, if you ask them what is their number one, what is it from an operational standpoint, what's your number one challenge when they pull back the covers, right? I guarantee you the small guys are in the like close to small, they're all gonna say in so many words, cash flow, right? The ins and outs, the puts and the takes into that account. So if we had to come up with a new financing model, right, for how we could help support their business, we should be able to think through that. Well, there are services out there, right? You've seen them all, right? Fintech has grown tremendously in this space with buy now, pay later types of solutions. If you wanted to integrate that or implement that in the legacy world, it would be incredibly tough, right? It's a standalone sort of solution that now on the back end, you've got a bunch of hamsters running around trying to basically aggregate everything together. Um, that didn't work, right? It doesn't work. What does work is when you have those that are responsible for solutioning, that's part of the actual implementation, that understands a lot of the challenges that are being faced, so that when we start coming up with these beautiful strategies, right? And I say that with quotes, I should air quote it. When you do that, what what you come up with now becomes an actual workable solution that everyone has responsibility for, and everyone is now again part of the relate part. They are related to the business outcome, what's achievable, and being tied to that. Previously, there was none of that. It was simply, hey, yeah, we want to stand this up. Okay, what's it going to take? Everything took 6 months, right? So, okay, well, there you go, right? So, and that was it. So that again necessitated the need for us to make that change, where instead of it being a 6 month exercise, you can actually bring that down to like 10 weeks maybe, right? So
That was a picture of the ordinary world. So Jeff, what was the picture of your ordinary world, and did you ever hesitate when you were called to adventure?
Yeah, I would say that um, in the ordinary world, we really were limited by our technology. So what we could do was really a function of, well, what does the platform that we're on allow us to do? And that was always the question. And very often the answer was, well, we can't do that. Even certain things that you think are very simple, like incorporating Apple Pay into our e-commerce site, that was something that actually we concluded we just cannot do on this platform. And for a company that wants to be on the cutting edge of technology and reaching our customers, whether they're D2C or B2B customers, in the way that they are used to interacting or transacting, it's just not acceptable. So we went from that world where we were limited by that to a world where really the only thing that limits us is just what do we want to allocate to? Like what is our strategy want to achieve, and when do we want to do it? Um, as for refusing the call, I mentioned a little bit earlier, our biggest concern before we made the move to Composable with commercetools was, well, are we really the kind of company that can do this? Like, are we too small? Do we not have what it takes to do it? And I would say that was our biggest hesitation. Um, we spent a lot of time trying to answer that question, understand it, and I'm really glad that we didn't refuse it because it's turned out really well. And I really do like to let other companies in our situation know that it isn't something where you have to be a massive company to benefit from using the most modern frameworks, the most modern technologies. Actually, in some ways, I think the smaller companies could benefit even more because it's something that really differentiates you from a lot of companies who are around your size.
That's great. Sounds like you kind of ripped the Band-Aid off. Yeah, like Steve Harvey says, you got to jump.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Um, so Mark,
yeah,
uh, you now have the freedom to live. What's life like now?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that if you ever want to see something very interesting, put IT and marketing in the same room. and talk about how you're going to solve a problem, right? And I think that what you now have in the afterworld, right, is effectively an integrated team whereby you have the business, and it could be functionally aligned, it could be simply as an operating unit in the same room and on the same team as other functions. In this case, IT specifically, and of course, ecom, and they're all now part of the working model. So, and we have, we've implemented, well, in previous companies that I've been at, we've implemented an agile strategy for marketing, as obviously as well as our development teams, and then as well within ecom and their development efforts too. Very new for some, actually very new in terms of the way of working, but now they're all sort of being part of the solution, right? They're all expected to deliver in these sprints. Um, that's new, right? The responsibility for the outcomes being driven across that entire team in terms of what are the outcomes that we're trying to necessitate. That's very new, and I can't underscore that enough. That now everyone's tied to the outcome, right? And everyone's solutioning for it too. So that's the beauty of it, I believe. Well, a lot of it anyway. Not most of it, but certainly a lot of it is that everyone's now in this integrated world, working toward the same business outcome that we're looking for.
Wow, that isn't that great? Everybody's holding hands and singing along.
Sort of, yeah, sort
That's
of.
great. Okay, cool. Jeff, now that you have freedom to live, tell us how life is.
Yeah, I mentioned that now we feel like the thing that limits us is really just our decisions about how to allocate resources to pursue the strategy we want to pursue. And it's not our platform or our e-commerce system. To give a really practical example of something that's changed, on our legacy platform, we had a B2B customer whose business with us was really kind of tapering off, and we reached out and asked, well, what's going on? Like, what's been happening? And he listed out 3 or 4 different areas that he wanted to work with us, ways he wanted to work with us through our online platform that just weren't working out for him, and changes he wanted to see made. And unfortunately, we really couldn't do anything for him at that time. Well, since we've switched to the composable architecture with commercetools, we were able to email him back and say, hey, all 3 or 4 things that you listed, we've solved for all of those things now. And come on back. And actually, it's been a great, he was really happy, and our business has started to go back up. So that gives you a really practical example of how things have changed.
That's great. That's growth. Okay. Um, Final question here. I got to tee this up a little bit. I was 3 when I first saw Star Wars, and so it's no surprise that my favorite part of any hero's journey is the supernatural aid. And so, Mark, if you could travel back in time to be your own mentor, what would be your message?
Yeah. My message would be very simple and succinct. It would be patient, but not slow. And what I mean by that is as it relates to this change that that you're going to undergo by implementing um, commerce tools isn't really around the technology itself or the implementation of it itself. It's really about the change management, right? That's going to be required to gain the adoption for those that are actually going to be doing the work. See, as I've been saying, like we've had to rethink the way in which we were operating to include IT as part of the business, to include our dev teams as part of the business and the business decisions around what can happen and what can't, and what are really true timelines for delivery. Um, that requires an effort of patience, right? Because this is very new. The working model is very new. And newer companies, maybe not so much, because a lot of them kind of came up this way, right? Where these teams were integrated. You had product teams that were part of, and IT was sort of a third party related service, but the dev environments were sort of part of the organic structure of the company. Well, that's the same here at companies that I've worked for, but the difference is that they've been in those same types of, they've been doing this type of work this way for the better part of their entire career. That change management requires being patient. And it's no longer what I would consider to be an afterthought or a stray line item, right? Well, in terms of any adoption plan, it's just say, yeah, we've got to do this thing, right? And how are we going to do it? We're going to set up some training sessions. No, you have to be patient and let people let this new way of working sort of take hold, because I have never seen, and everyone that's gone through this, in my opinion, that I've witnessed, so it's anecdotal, it's just my experience. Everyone prefers this method because people get included in decisions and conversations that they otherwise wouldn't be. So I would say in terms of being patient, not being slow, being very, very deliberate in your approach, but not forsaking what I would consider to be your velocity, it will be much more important to your ongoing success than the actual implementation itself, right? The tech implementation itself. Your success will be predicated on the ability of these teams to formulate and work through these issues, these new requirements, these new deliveries. They will be working through those things together. So that would be my advice to myself: be patient but not slow.
That's fantastic. I'm going to give myself that same advice. Love it. All right, Jeff, you get to travel back in time and be your own mentor, which is probably going to freak your old self out, but you're a resilient guy and you can take it. What are you telling yourself?
Yeah, I like patient but not slow. So I will say that as well. But I'd also say don't let fear prevent you from doing what you know is right for your business. Like I said, it was something that we thought about, it was something that we worried about. But I'm glad that we didn't let it stop us from doing the thing that we knew was right, which was moving to a modern framework and this modern architecture. So I think that really is the number one thing because, especially for a smaller company like we are, um, it can be a big change, and that can be something that you may not be comfortable taking on. But in the end, it's worth it.
That's some hero stuff right there. Don't let fear stop you from doing what's right for your business. Fantastic. All right. So, folks, that's a wrap for Joe and the heroes. And now I'm going to turn it over to Julia, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about the commercetools offering. So, with that, Julia, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all three of you. A huge thank you to Joe, Jeff, Mark, for all of these insights. I almost feel like I don't need to say anything. You guys have kind of made the case for composable commerce for us. But if we could maybe go back to the slides, just a few words from commercetools. What do we do at commercetools? We provide the market's leading composable commerce platform. It's specifically designed for the unique and complex requirements of B2B businesses. We give companies all of the components required to build and run those outstanding buying experiences for their customers, really focusing on what makes their customer so that these businesses can grow flexibly long term, optimize their operations, and stay competitive in an increasingly complex market. Next slide, please. I know that we have quite a bit of time for Q&A. So if you have questions, please start submitting those into the chat. But before we get to those questions, I just wanted to say that we have a ton of resources available on our website, commercetools.com, for business leaders who want to learn more about how it works and how other leading companies, not just Tecton and MSC Industrial, have done it and are achieving. So in the slides here, we've included 2 QR codes to just 2 of the many resources. The first one leads to a white paper on how to migrate from a legacy monolithic system to commercetools. So we kind of give you the step-by-step of how to do it. And the second one leads to a short guide on which features are actually important for B2Bs specifically to think about and assess when evaluating a commerce vendor and their goals. And so with that, we can bring back all of the panelists. I see you guys all still are here, and head to the first question in our Q&A. So the first question that came in, I think, is actually geared to all three of you. So I guess we'll start with Joe and kind of move to Jeff and Mark. That's how you guys are on my screen. But the question is around, everyone kind of talked about speed to market and, focusing on, the business strategy that you would like to achieve versus, kind of locking yourself into whatever box your existing platform offers. So, maybe from both of your, Jeff and Mark, perspectives as executives, and Joe, from your perspective, kind of talking to day to day, how do you justify this investment both internally and with your other executives with the board, and then how do you measure success to, I guess, continually justify that investment?
Oh, Mark, you're muted.
Sorry, I was saying, who would like to go first? That's what I was going to say.
Oh,
Yeah, but I'll be happy to jump in if you'd like. Okay, so for me, if I take off my shirt, which no one would like, but if I did, you would see the scars. Okay, and the best way I can describe it, an investment like this is going to require C-level sponsorship at some level, I would imagine. Um, Not because of the amount, but because of the nature of it, right? What we're talking about doing. And it doesn't have to be a big bang. It can be, modular in terms of with commercetools, you can, you know, buy certain components, et cetera, and just work at it that way. But what I would suggest, most important to any of it, is this, that you break everything down by business case. I'm sorry, by use cases, right? And you formulate the business case around it. So as an example, if you said like, I need to have a new payment, I need to use payments differently. Jeff mentioned we need Apple Pay, right? That you would show that business case associated with that use case for why it's going to give you what you're looking for. Because I stay away from the introduction of technology in terms of we need to do this because, right? We just show what we're trying to tackle and why we can't do it with what we've got, or you can sort of align them side by side and say what it would take in order to produce this outcome. And that will show you what you would be looking for if you annualize it, right? In terms of, now we bring in Apple Pay, we're going to see X amount of orders being supported through Apple Pay. And those look like this, versus obviously the delta is those that are not paying with Apple Pay but paying through some other mechanism. What does it lead to, right? Somewhat sophisticated in the analysis, but it doesn't have to be. But everybody responds to that business case, right? Everyone understands it. Everyone in the organization, your CFO, CHRO, everyone understands it, right? So I would take that approach, and I've learned to take that approach in any investment that's technology related. It's always, for me, it's a use case that's being supported by a business case that tells you why it's important for us to do it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with what Mark just said. I would also add, I mentioned about not being afraid to do the thing that you know is right for your business. So I think that really applies here. In some ways, the justification is that that these modern frameworks are the direction to go into. And I would point out one example that I think is maybe not realized. Like, we didn't even realize it when we started, but our ability to attract top talent actually increased when we switched to this architecture, because we were, especially with developers, but not just in developers, able to tell them, like, we are using the most modern frameworks, we can use the most advanced technologies, and when you come here, you're not going to be stuck in some legacy system writing in some code that nobody uses, or maybe only people who use this platform use. And that really has really increased the interest that we get from people who are in this area and who want to work using the most modern technology that they can. And so that's been a wonderful benefit to us. And hiring, of course, is one of the most important things that any company can do. And so I think that is a benefit that often is not realized, and we didn't even realize it right away.
That's great. I agree with. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I'm just seconding that point that Jeff made. That's all. Kudos.
Yeah, yeah, both of those are great points. Okay, so how can I add on to something great like what these two just said? I get a lot of calls from technology leaders that'll say, like, they'll start with saying, Joe, how do I justify this cost? And I tell them, do the ROI by starting with, on the left-hand side, the strategy. And if you lay out your strategy, you're going to get a sense of the return. And so you have the return first, and then you uh, take all those digital interactions, put them on think of it as like a stack rank backlog, and then the I is how you iteratively invest against those returns. But if you start with the return, I think that's what Mark was getting at, is start with the return, and that's different than justifying the budget. That's, what is it going to cost me to get to the thing that I want, and that's a little bit of a shift in perspective that's very, very helpful.
Thank you. These were awesome answers. I actually learned a lot as well. And I hope that our guests also, I think the question we get all the time at commercetools is, but how do you actually do it? And so I think kind of hearing these real world examples is really helpful. So something else, I see the next question coming in, and it was actually something that I was thinking about as all three of you gentlemen were talking, is, all of you kind of alluded to, integrating the outcomes with the work that was being done. I even took this down as a note. I think one of you had said, put IT and marketing in the same room and see what happens. And so when we talk about the teams, right, B2Bs are obviously in a much different place in terms of ways of working than I think your traditional B2C brands are. We talk about functional alignment. We talked about change management. From all three of your perspectives, how would you recommend to structure your teams? How would you recommend to actually go about that process of change management and getting, these disparate tech and business, IT and marketing stakeholders within one room? And what are kind of your thoughts around that?
I feel like
Sure.
I'm always going first. So go
I
ahead.
can go first.
Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
So, like I've said a few times, we're a smaller company. So, in some ways, yes, we have different teams. We have a operations IT team that is internal. We have our e-commerce or web development team. We have a marketing team, but we're actually all pretty close. We're in the same building. We're not that far away. So, there has to be cross-departmental work, and there is. But for us, it is something that is maybe a little bit more natural than if you're, of course, in different campuses or if you got people far away or whatever. I think that moving to this platform requires these teams to really be working closely together, because you have to integrate with your internal systems. You have to, of course, work on the outward facing platform. But for us, it's gone, I think, quite well, because we're a close knit team and we're near each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that for a larger company, that you are going to, well, it depends on where you are in your evolution. Let me just say it that way. If you already have your teams working under any one of the agile within agile methodology, right? Let's just say you're using Scrum, right? In our case, what we were talking about was really the inclusion of IT, right, into that team, as well as even marketing in this case, right? I would say, because a lot of the teams weren't set up that way, where you had functional alignment with the delivery teams, those that are working in these sprints or through these sprints. So there had to be an introductory period or some education, right, for both of those teams, right? Because, and I'm a big believer in agile. So for us, it was understanding that, okay, we now need to bring these other elements in to the teams, but they need to understand how these teams actually work. But the organization of those teams, focusing on, say, a specific aspect of, in our case of e-commerce, um, was really your traditional, you've got your cart, those that are responsible for cart and checkout, those are responsible for browse and search. Like they're going to be part of those teams now. So the alignment within, if you're going top of funnel, bottom of funnel, middle funnel, like whatever, however you have your e-commerce product team stood up and managing that space is you're just introducing other players into that now, right? But you have to get the change management element is really having them understand how to be a part of that team. What does it mean? Why is it valuable? So that it's not disruptive, right? So and again, that's where the patience comes in. And once everybody understands it, because I've only seen it where there's there's no reticence on the part of the actual um, Scrum teams themselves to include additional, out the additional functions within it. Um, it's really more about having those newcomers understand how this works and why it's important. And you get over that hump very, very quickly in that regard because they see it, right? I mean, if anybody that's working in Scrum, under Scrum, you understand why it's so valuable, right? You get it immediately, right? So your daily planning, your retrospectives, your like you get it, right? And it's things that none of those have ever done before in terms of marketing specifically, and in some cases IT. I won't speak for all of IT, so that would be my advice.
Yeah, those are, I agree with both of those. I would say also you could take a look at doing the user research collaboratively, doing the journey mapping collaboratively. That gets everyone building empathy for your customer, and that brings them into like more upstream into the decision process, and that'll build the muscle then uh, into the actual delivery and iteration of that. And some of the techniques that I've seen in user research have been to let anyone form a hypothesis and let everyone see how that tests out. And then the game isn't being right. The game is generating hypotheses that are testable. And then you give everyone shared purpose, and that'll bring everyone together.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that, the idea of shared purpose. I think it's interesting to think of a B2B manufacturer of tools or something like that, thinking about a shared purpose. We think about that more when we think about, these young, fun tech startups, kind of this Google Playland type of deal. But I think that the fact that a B2B manufacturer of industrial grade products can have that shared purpose and can change their ways of working to kind of be a lot more modern is very inspiring, at least for me. So, we have, I think, about 10 minutes left. So we'll do the last question. Um, Jeff, Mark, both of you are marketing executives. And I think traditionally the decision, said it right, he gets a lot of these tech executives that come to him saying, hey, how do I justify this decision? I think when you're choosing a product like a commerce engine, right? It's a very technical product. It's an infrastructure and architecture. And I think the kind of the traditional way of thinking about it was always, oh, let the tech teams, let IT make this decision. But I feel very lucky today that we're joined by both of you who are marketing executives. So from your marketing executive standpoint, how do you see your role as a marketing executive in this whole process? Not just making the decision, helping the tech teams make the decision, justifying that ROI, measuring success, but also driving that business strategy forward. And how do you fit in within this whole change management process? And maybe what advice you would give to other marketing executives who are trying to affect that change within their organizations. And I guess, Joe, the question to you is, what advice would you give to the marketing executives based on all of the tech folks that you speak to, as well as the marketing folks? So who wants to start?
I can start. So I am, chief marketing officer, but I'm very close to the technology at our company. I think naturally I'm just interested in it, and I think that's pretty important. I do think that you can't make these decisions in a bubble, and that it's important that you get buy-in across the company, especially from the people who are going to be most affected by this. So I think it's my duty, really, in my role, to understand the technology as well that our teams are going to be using. So I was very closely involved working with our developer team and some others at the company in choosing commerce tools and going with that platform and learning about the platforms and learning about Composable. And it's a lot to learn, but that's the job, is to learn these things and make really good decisions based on them. So I think it's just a part of the job. I know marketing, maybe it sounds like it doesn't always have to have any technical aspects to it, but I think maybe at the highest level, you can be more of a jack of all trades in these areas. So that's how I view it for myself, and that's how we made that decision.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's really great, Jeff. I agree with you. And I think, so the first thing I would say is, because from a marketing standpoint, you already have, in the case of myself and Jeff, as he's already said, you have willing participants, right? For a willing partners, right? Let me say it, not participant, but a partner and an ally for um, for what it is that for why you would want to go with this composable model. So you don't have to. That's one less C-level person you have to convince, right? Matter of fact, I would venture to say that I know I would, and my venture is to say that I'm sure Jeff would agree. Like we will help carry the water, right, for you. I think what Joe mentioned a bit ago about everyone participating in the customer journey and kind of crafting that, like that's, as an example, that to bring everyone along together. That is an incredible way in which to start bringing people along. And when you take something like that and you overlay it with, okay, we've got this new commerce engine we want to implement. Well, I don't know that we would really, marketing can help make the case for why you would want to do that. Again, going back to the use cases and the business cases around it, and you've got people that are really interested in making that come to life, right? So you have that, and you want to get that level of a buy-in from marketing specifically. Now, I'm a little bit biased, right? Because I come out of the developer ranks. That's where I come from. So my background is a little bit. I'm a little biased, okay? But if you talk to, and this is Julia, probably another webinar, right, where if you look at the state of marketing and you look at what marketers and CMOs are required to do now, and what they're, in terms of just from a MarTech and a ad tech stack type of framework, like, technology is not anything new to these newer marketing executives, right? They get it because, quite frankly, much of that space that I just mentioned is in the composable space, right? Like, that's how you think of standing up and tearing down services, et cetera. But also, when you get someone, like when you get marketers involved, when you have to make a case, and I think this was also made a moment ago, which I completely agree with, that the changes in the culture center around things like experimentation, right? Like, I can stand up a service, test it, and see if it's working or not, if there's any value associated with it. And if it's good, great. We'll find a way to, include this more broadly with everything that we're doing. If it doesn't, we'll just tear it down, right? Like, that's, but you get away from especially again, a legacy sort of laggard kind of adopter industry, you get away from this being bad, right? Like, we need to test hypotheses routinely as part of how we go to market with anything. You're going to get a lot of support on the marketing side for that, is what I'm saying. And I think you need to, and if they don't, just have them come see myself or Jeff or Joe, right? That's how I would say it. Like, we'll talk to them, right? So
That's great. Have them talk to us. This is great. We're on your side. Yeah. So that's great advice. If I'm talking to a marketing leader, I would say speak in value language. Use that as the common language across all the teams and the tech teams. Now, when I go and talk to tech leaders, I tell them and their teams to speak in value language. I don't think anyone's going to get benefit from asking a question in GraphQL. I think that everyone's going to get value and speaking in value languages, using value terms, understanding, and and the value is going to be different in every company. The things that are important to your customers. So speak in value language and let that be the Rosetta Stone.
I love that. Thank you all. And, I was smiling and laughing a bit when you guys were speaking because, I too am a marketer. And, I like to think of what we do as a lot more of a science that has a bit of creativity embedded in it. So, I studied science in university and, I really think it's the scientific method that we're doing as marketers all the time, right? We're always experimenting, we're forming hypotheses, and I think this is applicable to commerce, to change management, to everything. So I really do think that marketing does have this very central and also very important role to play. And I like what you guys said that it's kind of a have one stakeholder, a group of stakeholders in your corner if you want to make that change. And so, that's a really kind of positive place to start from. So I think we're almost at time, and I don't see any other questions. So this seems like a natural point to close off. Thank you once again, Jeff, Mark, Joe. You guys have been incredible panelists. Thank you for sharing your insights. It was an honor and a pleasure. And thank you to everyone who attended. I wish everyone a wonderful rest of your week, and please don't hesitate to reach out to commercetools for additional information.
Thank you.
All right,
Awesome.
thank you.